We learned a few new big things and a couple smaller topics, and it's worth recapping because the point of this course was not to build a larger project, but to learn certain things. The first big thing you learned was more of a softer topic in that it wasn't about a new framework, but more about how to organize your code. This project was long, particularly the part where we set up the UI. And one of the reasons for that, besides there being many components to this app, was the fact that for each view, we created several small objects that did one thing. A table view controller simply initialized an instance of the table view along with any other supporting objects it needed. The only thing our controllers were really doing was facilitating communication between other view controllers. Each controller talked to a data source object, which was responsible for instructing the table view on how to set itself up. The data source object then communicated with two small classes itself, a custom UI table view cell class and a view model that prepped data from the model to be delivered to the cell. In addition, each of those classes exposed only the parts of it that it needed to. So the data source kept the data private so that it could not directly be mutated from the outside and could only be changed in the way that we defined. This prevents any inadvertent stuff from happening to the underlying data. Similarly, cell instances set up the underlying views itself by exposing a configure method that accepted an instance of the view model. All of this meant that the logic for each aspect, whether it is view configuration, table view setup, and so on, are all in very specific places and not spread out everywhere. If we need to change any of this functionality, we make those changes to very specific objects. Now, in fact, had we used protocols to define some general interfaces, we can easily substitute a different cell or a different view model to alter the look of the app with ease. The second big topic we learned was understanding how to explore an API, particularly one that wasn't well documented, and how to model it using some of Swift's native features. The enum approach we took makes URL creation much easier, and we don't have to worry about creating URL strings on the fly. All of that is handled. In addition, you also know now how to encode URLs, both using URL query item and the URL component structs, or even if you had to, how to do it yourself, because we walked through that code together. Now, we did have to do some additional work to get the entity and attributes components right, but again, that's a small price to pay for overall ease in the long run. The third complex topic, and probably the most useful to you, was how to download assets asynchronously using operations and operation queues. This knowledge is going to come in handy, and now you can download any large file in the background without hindering the user. You can also use operations to background complex tasks like applying a filter to an image, something that we'll look at very soon. So these concepts should be your big takeaways. You know how to write sufficiently complex networking code and how to start making your code bases even more modular. In terms of smaller topics, we learned about stubbing data so that we can build components of the app in isolation. We got the UI set up without having to worry about networking code, which made it less of a headache. Had we experienced any errors, had we run into any errors, we knew then that they were related to either the UI or the networking code, whatever we were working on at that point, because we worked on those parts in distinct phases. We did have to make some adjustment in the end, as we saw that when working with data from the web, we may not have the data by the time we segue to the new controllers, but because things were so modular, that was very easy to work through. All in all, this was a difficult course, so if you're unclear with some stuff, take your time, go over it. Read up on all the links and get in some practice building your own apps. I'll see you in the next course.